Welcome to Innovation in Government, presented by Carasoft. This program's from GovForward's ATO and Cloud Security Summit at the Waldorf Astoria near the White House in Washington. I'm your host, Francis Rose. Over the next hour, you'll meet leaders from the General Services Administration, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and NASA SUB, and industry leaders that are supporting the federal government's cloud security community. This event comes shortly after GSA's introduced a new roadmap for FEDRAMP. I asked Bethany Blackwell, Vice President of Sales at Carasoft, about the impact of the new roadmap.
Really excited to be here. First of all, this is an awesome event. I think this is 6 years going that we've got this going on. It's still early in the day, but I think there's been a lot of excitement already. We sat through a session earlier this morning with OMB, and that team had a lot of new insights. There's been the memo that came out a week or two ago with some of the exciting news about the speeding up of some of our Gen AI technologies and how we're going to be able to get those through FedRAMP faster. So really excited about that. I could tell a lot of vendors in the room, especially afterwards, wanted to get some time with OMB and see, how are we going to prioritize that, right? Not great news for if you're not in Gen AI, but hey, that's something that's super important to a lot of our agencies right now. So that was a huge takeaway. We're excited about that. Also kind of touching on some of the SCRs, right, and the change requests and how we're going to be able to speed up those processes. A lot of what I hear from our customers is what they're asking about when it comes to, hey, when is this feature going to be available? When is this functionality going to be available in the platform? And it always kills me to kind of tell them like, hey, it's on the roadmap. We've got to go through a change process with FedRAMP to make sure it's there. So I'm really excited to kind of see how that plays forward with OSCAL and some of the other things that OMB is doing. They definitely recognize the need for feature parity across the different platforms. If our commercial counterparts are getting it, we should be able to deliver that immediately to our counterparts in public sector. They are doing just as challenging, if not more challenging, roles than our commercial folks, and there's no reason we shouldn't be able to roll out those technologies just as quickly.
It's got to be gratifying, though, that agencies are asking you for specific functions and features. It indicates to me, at least, that they're doing the homework about what is available to them, what the art of the possible is, to then be able to come to you and say, we'd like to be able to do this or that.
Absolutely. I've been doing this for a long time, and 10, 15 years ago when we first, started talking about cloud and the platform, it wasn't, something that all our customers were super interested in. And now, we're not standardized, I would say, on cloud, but it's a huge part of our go-to-market strategy for a lot of our customers right now. And they're solving a lot of mission-critical problems using these tools. And so when they see that the tools that they already owning have made improvements, have made developments that a lot of times doesn't cost any extra money for them even to be able to utilize, they're quick to jump on it. They're following the deployments of these new technologies within the platforms that they have, especially when it comes to AI. I think that's the big one that we keep seeing. A lot of our cloud partners are developing and rolling out new AI features, and our customers are excited to use those. And I think with this new change from OMB, they're going to be able to use those even more quickly.
Quick final thought: are they using those toward particular use cases, or is it still more of an experimentation phase in your view?
To me, I think they're trying to experiment. They see what their commercial counterparts are doing, right? And it's very similar use cases. They've got to figure out how are they going to be able to use it as they engage with their citizens, right? A super easy, one is like these call centers, right? And these chatbots, and how do we make sure that that they're becoming actually somebody that you feel like you're talking to and you're not feeling like you're talking to a chatbot, and AI is really going to help, with something like that. So while I still think they're in experimental phase, I think there's a lot of customers that are ready to actually go and actually start using this as soon as they get, the green light on these products.
Bethany Blackwell of Carasoft. Two major developments are behind the new FedRAMP roadmap. One is Congress codifying FedRAMP into law in 2022. The other's the Office of Management and Budget's draft guidance on FedRAMP last year. Eric Mill is Executive Director for Cloud Strategy at GSA. At the Carasoft ATO and Cloud Security Summit, I ask him why the release of the new roadmap is so important now.
It was very important for us as GSA, as FEDRAMP, to show our thinking, our plan, how we believe we can respond to what are pretty well-known stakeholder concerns in the FEDRAMP space. I mean, there's time, there's cost, but then there's also places in which people can just come away from the FEDRAMP program feeling like, did that make sense? Like, did we have to do it that way? We're a program where we take a lot of the things that have been designed with the federal government in mind from a security perspective. We try to really just apply it out in the cloud in the private sector usually. And so we are where the rubber meets the road. And so we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up very publicly and able to have a theory of change that people can see and reason about for how we're going to address those. And what I do often say to cloud providers, agencies, and others about this is what you can do with this is look at that and think about how to engage with this. We're sharing here, here's what our priorities are, here's what our motivations are, right? And so if there are ideas that have just been sitting on the back burner, or there's somebody in your agency who's just been had this FEDRAMP project and collaboration they've wanted to do for a while, and they just haven't been able to get it onto the front burner, maybe now's the time, right? And we are as we might talk about, also opening up opportunities very directly for cloud providers to come work with us, participate in pilots. We released one this week. And so we think we're providing a whole lot of hooks for cloud providers and agencies to get involved.
There are 4 goals that you and your colleagues GSA write about in this roadmap: orienting around the customer experience, cybersecurity leadership, scaling a trusted marketplace, smarter technology-forward operations. And then you write about specific initiatives that you're undertaking. One of those I wanted to ask you about is publishing new customer-oriented program metrics. What will those metrics include, and what are you measuring essentially with those metrics?
Yeah, so we're really excited about that. We think it's very important that our metrics provide the right incentives for the program. They reflect both the things that are in our control, right? The things that we could put SLAs, kind of where people think of them as service level agreements. Like, what are the things where our processes we can just operate them tightly? They're in our control. But then there's the other half of the equation, which is what are the impacts that FEDRAMP is having on the overall time and cost that people experience when working with it, even in parts of the program that are where there's many people involved and it's a little harder to predict how things will go. That's a tricky problem. So one of the ways we're going to handle that is, and what you'll see from us is we're going to publish a whole suite of proposed metrics with different trade-offs for how we might go about doing this and how we might measure them. So we're going to seek public comment on those things. Hopefully you should see those coming out a little bit later this month. But what we want to do is make sure that we have some kind of feedback loop with the outside world, right? With the impacts that our processes and our policies have on the customers of the program. And I think that has been missing a little bit in how the program is measured, and that's an element we want to make sure is present.
Another important development happening concurrently with the new roadmap is the Emerging Technology Prioritization Framework. And I was struck by the coverage around this. A lot of people that wrote about this are talking about it on LinkedIn and other places, are reflecting the artificial intelligence content in this. But I note there's a passage in here that you specifically write that it's not only about AI. Why do you think people are missing that? Is it just because AI is hot right now? Is there some other factor? And why was it important for you to point out this framework is not just about artificial intelligence?
Yeah, and these don't have to be in competition with each other. AI is, of course, very important right now. There's a lot of focus on it. The Emerging Technology Framework was also developed in response to a tasking in the Artificial Intelligence Executive Order. So that's all understandable, and we care quite a bit about that and want to make sure we are doing our part to help make sure the federal government has these tools available to them. But it is very important to us that it be understood, and whether people notice that now or notice that later, it's very important for us to establish this as a more general prioritization framework, because there are more things out there than artificial intelligence that either now or in the future will make sense for us to prioritize. I think one thing I've said about this is that FEDRAMP hasn't really had any prioritization framework at all up to this point. It's run more or less as a first in, first out kind of model. And that's very important from a fairness perspective, predictability, consistency. But what that is missing, if that's all you ever do, is just the ability to focus the program on what the government needs at the moment. And that's something that most government programs have some ability to do. And when you have something like an executive order or a law or these things that are meant to pull the government together towards a common goal, we don't think artificial intelligence is going to be the last time that ever happens.
Sure. And to that end, you mentioned a moment ago that this reflects what's happening now and in the future, and that was my takeaway from it, is that this is intended to be something that lasts for a long time and not just solve a problem today.
We put in quite a bit of effort into this with that in mind, that this is going to be how we operationalize prioritization going forward.
How did you consider what the possibilities of technology in the future are in order to do that? Or doesn't that matter? Is it more about the technique by which one evaluates whatever it is that comes down the pike?
Yeah, there's going to be specific things for each technology in it. Certainly, quite a bit of the work that we did in the draft and the final was AI specific to ascertain what's a reasonable way to make sure that we are, in fact, prioritizing new generative AI that meets what is asked for and isn't the sort of AI or machine learning and other things that have actually been around for quite some time. We do anticipate a lot of folks are going to apply to this and participate. We need to measure, is this the thing that we're targeting? But we don't want to do that in such a way that it gets capricious, or we're starting to just set a nebulous quality bar. We're not trying to measure that. We are trying to make sure we're prioritizing the right kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So, one of our changes in the final was moving away from sort of benchmarks from third parties and moving towards taking in model cards that are industry standard. So for other emerging, other technologies in the future that we prioritize, there's going to be something that is specific to that technology that we'll have to reason about just the same, and that's what we did for AI.
We just have a couple of minutes left, but we talked before we turned the cameras on about the way that you will try to find the people that you need to fill this in. You were very passionate about that aspect of all of this. What does that look like from your perspective? Where do you go to find these people? What do you want the people who will be executing on these visions, not just for GSA, but all across the government? What will they be doing, and where do you expect to go find them?
Yeah, appreciate that. We are overall working very hard to just expand the capacity of the FEDRAMP ecosystem to operate and to scale. Some of that is not hiring. Some of that's partnering with DISA and other agencies that have mature authorization process to harness their energy. But a big part of that is hiring. We were very happy to show up to the most recent Tech2Gov hiring fair that OPM hosted a couple months ago. It was AI focused, and we had a couple of positions open for folks with backgrounds in data science and machine learning, for our automation infrastructure and for how we just get insights from the security information we have. We are in the final stages of hiring a FedRAMP director, and we are not done. There's going to be more positions that we have coming. For those who follow how our agency does hiring, join.tts.gsa.gov is where we put up postings ahead of time, where we put up, here's what the position's going to be, and you can sign up for alerts. It ultimately all goes through USA Jobs, but we go out of our way to try to give a lot of advance notice and information to applicants, and we'll have more to come.
Eric Mill of GSA. The new FedRAMP roadmap is a path for agencies to follow, according to GSA, but agencies will still have to take the action of walking that path. Matt Mandrock is head of public sector for Zoom. He says there are two main areas posing challenges for agencies when they walk that path.
One is legacy systems that are not allowing organizations and agencies to scale. They're trying to mix in legacy systems with FedRAMP cloud solutions, and it's hampered the opportunity for agencies to scale and do things they want to do in innovation. The second component is automation, where they aren't, since these many agencies looking at, we have all these investments they've made into legacy, into obviously FedRAMP solutions. But how do you take that with industry and look at the automation that you can do amongst them, how we've done this in different parts of other industries, and taking those best practices and bringing it to the government, where you can take secure cloud platforms and actually use automation as a way to help them scale and really add into this whole executive order around employee experience and customer experience.
When you talk about the legacy systems integration with FedRAMP approved applications. Is the as-a-service concept, the as-a-service worldview, making that process easier or more difficult, do you think, for agencies?
It's more difficult because they can't, legacy systems you can't scale because they're not FedRAMP authorized. So in that, it really hampers the opportunity, and as they make investments and look at the future, you look at what agencies go across and they add in, our investment we're going to make now has to go for the next 5 to 7 years. Well, those investments they've made in the past, maybe coming at the tail end of that 5 to 7 years, now they have to look at how do we look at this differently? How does this fit into the workflow that we have? Our employees are doing things differently than they did 5, 7 years ago. It's not where everybody's coming in the office. It's a hybrid environment, and really allows them, the agencies, to take that opportunity to take these new systems, these FedRAMP authorized cloud platforms that are secure. You go through FedRAMP Moderate or through a JAB process. Really a great opportunity then for them to look at technologies replacing these legacy systems to create that next environment where they can start to take getting those FedRAMP authorized platforms in, and then looking at the authorization for opportunity for them to create automation.
Given the budget situation that most agencies find themselves in, both from a size point of view and from a timing or consistency point of view, is replacing those legacy systems really the only effective possibility, or are there things that agencies can do to kind of bridge the gap between where they are today and when they can actually replace those systems that connect to other systems?
Yeah, it's hard to say that you want to make a full pull-out and just change something right away, and there has to be a reason for it. So you start to look at what they're doing around the customer employee experience, these work groups that are looking at what is our workflow, what are we doing, how are we doing things. If we replace something, this is what we did before, but now how we're doing it much differently. So as they work through that process, it really allows the opportunity for them to, what do we want to use for that technology? And then when they create that solution, I call it fiscal responsibility from an agency. We just don't want to say we're going to spend money and go buy something new. But if you can look at the workflow and the justification of what you're doing and create the automation process. We had an agency that took thousands of people. Their IT team was inundated with requests for all the provisioning for phone for all the groups are doing. We worked along with another FedRAMP platform, ServiceNow, with the Zoom for Government platform, and we were able to create a self-provisioning process which allowed them to, these over 8,000 employees, scale to do self-provisioning, which took almost 85% of the workload on the IT team off. So now you really look at, it's not just a technology replacement, it's a workflow, it's an automation, it's the opportunity to really let the IT teams focus on the most important things that they can around cloud security, all these things there, but creating that automation with these platforms that are FedRAMP authorized.
We have less than a minute. What's the model that agencies can take from the example that you just described and maybe apply to any other different kind of use case?
Yeah. I think it's partnering with industry. Industry has seen so many things, in whether we take best practices from our finance or retail or whatever, other groups, and we actually take these things. Industry talks to each other. We also take best practices from other agencies. So we talk about plagiarizing was so bad when we were younger. Now the opportunity to plagiarize, great things that people are doing. So industry, we're going to see more and more of industry coming together, where it's not just one or two vendor coming in each one. You're going to see 3, 4, 5 vendors come together, help agencies create a solution that's really secure, creates automation, creates the workflow and the opportunity for the employee and customer experience to the next level.
Matt Mandrock of Zoom. The government and industry speakers at this event talked a lot about the challenges they're up against, but not all the news is bad. Steve Pepino is Principal Cybersecurity Architect at Salesforce. He says there are both challenges in the cloud and solutions for those challenges.
And I think about it, as I do most things, from a people, process, and technology perspective. So from a people perspective, and this is nothing new, we have a significant skill gap and pay gap that goes hand in hand with that. From a skills perspective, and this isn't limited to just the government, this is across the nation, but we have a limited cyber workforce. And so that's a real challenge that we face. But I think what's more important, well, just as important, is that cyber workforce, getting them interested in working with the government, right? And so how do we attract these very highly talented folks to work for the government? And we have to start looking at the pay limitations. I know plenty of very talented cybersecurity folks who have a ton of experience, but they often find that when they're interested in the government, there are limitations, like they're required to have some specific certification. They don't have that certification. They're offered to come in at a lower pay level, and that causes a problem. So I think we have to really address this issue with the workforce. And as we look at getting them properly educated, how we can collaborate with academia and certifying institutions. And this is already happening, right? There's a lot of public-private partnerships between the government and academia. But I'm a big fan of addressing problems at their root. And without these people, the rest of it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. What can each of the people in those partnerships do? You talked about government, you talked about industry, you talked about academia. Are they doing things now that they should do more of? Are there things that they're not doing, any of those three partners, that they could start doing?
Yeah, and going back to the certifications and the pay, I think the government has talked about this a lot, but we still see the same limitations and requirements, whether you're coming at it from a contractor perspective or government personnel directly. And so I think the government could do more to relax some of those requirements. Look, don't get me wrong, having the right certification is important, but if you have an equivalent background, right, just like the requirement to have a four-year college degree or an advanced degree, that's great. But if you have someone with a similar background, then why not hire them for that experience? So I think government can definitely, flex a little bit there from what they're used to. Academia, I think they're already doing a great job with their partnerships, right? There are a lot of wonderful certifications coming out of institutions who are partnered with organizations like CISA and NSA. So I think as long as they keep that going, we're headed in the right direction.
What is the mark of success? Is it just the number of people that are coming in, or is it also necessary? I'm sure it's important. Is it also necessary to somehow qualify the type of experience or knowledge or whatever that they bring in?
I think we have to keep our eye on the number, the enrollment, and the diversity of the enrollment in academic institutions in these cyber programs, right? So we want that diverse workforce that helps any cybersecurity program from a maturity perspective. So we have to keep our eye on that number. That number needs to keep going up. We know there's a significant deficit today. But from a quality perspective, I think that's where other measures come into play. Things like, if we're looking at a grade point average or things of that nature, right? The high quality of folks, they're going to get pulled in first to the government, hopefully. But you're right. We have to look at that from both perspectives.
Mm-hmm. And as the numbers start to fill out, because it sounds like everybody's trying to tackle this problem, as the numbers start to fill out, what does the dispersion throughout the government look like, do you think? Who goes where, and how does one distinguish what the right people in the right spots are?
Yeah, and I think the bigger problem there is really about how the government operates as a whole, from enterprise level down to individual agencies. We have organizations like DISA and DoD, right? We have CISA. We have NSA. Those are kind of those top-down enterprise agencies that have oversight of all this. But then you have the individual agencies themselves. So I think there has to be this coordination. Obviously, I think you want the best of breed at those higher enterprise levels. But you need folks, where the rubber meets the road, who are hands-on keyboard at the individual agency levels, especially in the military and in the intelligence community, who are there to get the job done as well. So there's that top-down approach, but there's that bottom-up approach as well, and there has to be that coordination between the agencies to figure out that division of labor.
Steve Pepino of Salesforce. The solutions agencies are using for their cloud and cyber challenges are coming from all over, and they include solutions that aren't exclusive to cyber. Amber Pearson is the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs. She says one of her top priorities now is automation.
One of the key aspects that we've been leading in the area for automation is how do we optimize our authority to operate process, our ATOs. And as you also know, that FEDRAMP just updated their guidance. VA is now a board member as a part of the FEDRAMP board, and we're able to bring on that skill set engineering and cybersecurity perspectives. My colleague, Carrie Lee, is one of those board members, and so she'll be able to bring those challenges that we're seeing when we talk about how do we scale and have speed when we deploy our cloud service products. And one of the particular areas around goals is optimizing ATO so that we could also keep up with the speed of innovation. So as we are one of the largest or the largest integrated healthcare provider in the nation. And so what that means is that we have a lot of complexity in scope, and we need to make sure that we are able to provide that best-in-class technology, which turns us to cloud service providers and cloud service offerings, so that we can make sure that our patients are being able to get access to healthcare, and also be able to make sure that we are applying those critical cybersecurity protections. And so when you think about the innovations in this space and how do we automate, one of our focus areas is going from an traditional ATO timeline of maybe 360 days to go through the different wickets of assessing and authorizing. We're really leaning forward in with FedRAMP, and how do we automate that? How do we get to faster production in terms of those products? So our goals are still centered around automation and getting at the speed and scale that we need to continue to provide that level of care for our veterans, families, their caregivers, and survivors.
How do you evaluate what's eligible or ripe for automation and what still needs more time on the vine?
Yeah, so we look at what are repeatable processes? That's the first step, because that's when you can typically figure out a way to automate. And what do we want to make sure that we're reducing human error? And where do we want to speed up in terms of our process? We operate at vision-led execution. So we usually start off with a vision. We actually have big, audacious goals every year, and we track that through objectives and key results. And so we're continuously looking at do our customers need. We have a feedback mechanism for our customers, and so we're looking at those different types of feedback that comes into our queue, so that we can make sure that we're continuing to look at what makes sense. Another area that we tend to prioritize is our most critical systems. How can we ensure that we're adding automation where necessary so that we can speed up that critical software delivery?
You talked about the new makeup of the FEDRAMP board, and it sounds like there's tremendous value, not just to you at VA, but to all of the agencies that have members on the board now, at just having that voice heard in the discussions that go on around FEDRAMP. Is that a fair read on my part?
Absolutely. And the key area about the new FEDRAMP board is there's many expertise, many different backgrounds. My colleague, Carrie Lee, is an executive within VA, and she sits on that board. And so she's able to bring in VA's challenges and some of our key areas that we're going to be focusing over previous years. She also has the largest software as a service deployment across the federal agency. So it'll be great to see that those different skill sets come together and really address some of the challenges. I know one of the particular areas that I see that's still going to be a challenge for the FEDRAMP board is the presumption of adequacy. And so getting out of having the federal government get out of the mindset of having to redo the work of the FEDRAMP authorizations. So typically in the past, we would see organizations take a look at those products and then say, hey, I think I need to dive deeper, more beyond FEDRAMP. And so that really does slow organizations down, and it also decreases the speed and how we can actually deploy those products.
You were on a panel here with Drew Mickelgard, the Deputy CIO of the United States, and you talked about something that I'm not familiar with. So help me understand what the Open Security Control Assessment language is and why it's important to the FEDRAMP process.
Yes, so OSCAL. So VA is the first federal agency to submit OSCAL formatted system security plans to the FEDRAMP. And so what that means is that we were able to take a 426 SSP text file-based format and convert it into machine-readable language. So why is that such a big deal? It's a big deal because it's the first step in how we automate. And it also allows us to programmatically automate security controls and key metrics so that we can get to real-time risk, and it also helps us build out our continuous monitoring program. And so when we think about CONMON, which is continuous monitoring, we think about how accessible is it for us to have visibility into the risk? Am I able to actually understand, the risk in terms of vulnerabilities, the threat landscape? Those are key essential items that we tend to mainly look at through our assessment and authorization process. So OSCO helps us speed up. It helps us speed up and streamline the ATO process.
That sounds extremely valuable to the vendors who complain all the time about that ATO process and how they get through it to be able to actually provide you with security services.
Yeah, I'm sure vendors are happy to see that we're all in the federal government are having our eyes on how do we embrace automation, because time and time again, you'll see that there's a burden of work. It's very manual and tedious, and it usually takes a very long time to get through the assessment and authorization process across the federal government. And that usually is something that stands still innovation. So when you think about these innovative technologies that are happening with the cloud service areas, you want to be able to have a process that helps you deploy it quickly. And so this is where the FedRAMP, I really love their division and where they're headed in terms of embracing automation altogether.
We have about a minute left. What does a mature FedRAMP environment look like, not just at VA, but broadly across the federal government? Where would you like to see this concept, this movement go in the next 18 months, 2 years?
Reuse. Reuse is a big deal in ensuring that federal governments have that level of trust and confidence in the FedRAMP products that are being authorized. That's going to be key in helping federal leaders get out of their own way in terms of taking that additional level of work and assessing and to ensure that the capabilities are adequate and secure. And so I see FedRAMP being able to get in front of that with the new board, with the new skill sets. And so I am definitely ready for the automation and to be able to start assessing and authorizing things at a much more faster pace.
Amber Pearson of VA. Automation like the VA is using for cloud cybersecurity gets a huge backup now from artificial intelligence. Lindsay Gillespie is Senior Solutions Engineer at Databricks. She says she's not surprised that AI is changing everything.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of changes coming down the pipeline in the next 5 years. I see at the core of all of it being AI, whether or not your team's using it directly or if you're supporting other teams that are using it, no matter how you're procuring it, if you're generating some kind of model yourself or if you're buying some kind of software solution. No matter what, AI is going to have an impact in the cloud security for your organization. What that means, an actual tangible use case, that could be detecting and analyzing any kind of cyber threats and responding to them efficiently. It can mean more data protection, trying to monitor data flows. But also, again, if your team's not doing that, there's kind of the behind the scenes work that you need to set up for your organization to succeed with those use cases. Some of the, there's the shiny AI use cases, and then there's the behind the scenes data engineering work, the governance work to make sure that you have access to all the data, but you're actually able to govern it and control that access as well.
Yeah, there are a couple of themes that agency people keep telling me about AI, the kind of the intersection of AI and cyber and security, and that is how does one secure their AI tools, and then the other is how does one use AI in cyber defenses all across the enterprise. Are you seeing one of those that's kind of outshining the other at this point, or are they both kind of moving on equal tracks, do you think?
In my opinion, they're moving on equal tracks because you need both to be able to do it. You need the excitement, you need the visionaries who want to do it, and you also need the forward planning of, okay, how are we going to start right now so that we succeed not only for POC in the next 3 months, but also 5 years down the road, we want to actually scale it out and productionize it. What does that look like? So I think, learning a ton at the beginning, learning's the best way. So having these conversations internally within your organization and also externally, that's the first step, is just having that good foundation of what you want to do. And then getting a better understanding of what tools are within your organization, the data landscape, having the CISOs working with the CIOs, CDOs, everybody working together to figure out whose role it's going to be in all this, and getting that landscape, because you might not have the data ready yet. So even if you have these great ideas and the use cases ready, you need clean data to be able to support a lot of that, and ideally in the cloud. But it just depends. So I think getting that full picture and having the foundation of what you want to do is the best start to be able to get going.
You talked about the importance of learning. Where do you recommend that agency people go to learn about what the potential is, what the art of the possible is?
Oh gosh. My first question back to that is, how do you like to learn? There's a variety of different methods. I love podcasts and YouTube, but it really just depends on the learner themselves. That's probably the number one thing, is just meeting people where they're at and wherever they want to learn. So if you're in the car driving, you only have 15 minutes a day to be able to listen to a podcast in between the craziness of life, then there's different podcasts out there that are well suited for whichever part you want to dig into. For me, I just try to get the daily updates to try to somewhat stay in sync with AI's evolving rapidly. Every day there's new things coming out. So just trying to get those little tidbits every day of what's going on is a good way, at least for myself. But if you're just starting, really just those intro 100 levels. For me, I'm visual, so YouTube videos. But there's a lot of courses out there, free online courses. So it just really depends on how you want to learn.
Lindsay Gillespie of Databricks. Federal cybersecurity leaders tell me their most important partners are their budget and procurement peers. One of the most popular places federal leaders go for acquisitions is NASA Soup. Joanne Wojtek is program director for NASA Soup. She says she doesn't hear as many questions about FedRAMP now from agency customers as she used to.
Perhaps that's because there's enough of an understanding of where it's at and where it's not at. A lot more about software and the issues that are occurring with that, and of course supply chain. We are continuing at Soup, where NASA Soup, we provide a FedRAMP page, which I think also helps our customers. We try to summarize all the information that's out there to make it easy to find, so that if they do have a question, we can point them to the right place. I think there's still obviously is concern to what extent is the use of FedRAMP keeping agencies from also doing their work. So you also have to be careful balancing where security is. That's always a question with security. As someone who's been on both sides of wanting more security and wanting to get rid of it completely so I can get my work done. But you have to really look at where each agency. I think the agencies, when they come to us, when they come to acquire something, they're acquiring it with knowledge ahead of time. And I think before there wasn't as much knowledge out there about what they can and can't get. And we're not going to provide anything that's not, we don't provide new information. We provide information that already exists. So they can come to us if they are concerned, or questioning things.
You touched on something that I think, though, is maybe another thing that's changed dramatically over time, and that's user experience. I imagine you get a lot of inquiries about user experience tools, customer experience, citizen experience tools than you have in the past, too. Is that a fair read on my part?
I would say when people come to a government-wide contract vehicle, they are looking for what they already know. It's definitely is different from the older days when people would come and say, I just have a requirement, I don't know what I'm going to get. I feel like the knowledge base out there is such that they are looking for, how do I make sure I'm following the policies is probably their biggest question. And in fact, we have added a whole policy team now that we used to not have. So when you talk about security, where do we go with that? And FedRAMP actually fits under that now. It used to just be part of our data collection, but FedRAMP and the software attestation issues and supply chain, we've pushed those all into a policy group, because it's not the tools so much as making sure the tools meet the policy, because policy is trying to ensure that we are in the cycle of things and being secure. So we're in this little cycle now of policy pushing security tools that then push policy and wrapping around.
What have been the most recent developments that are impacting the way that people make buying decisions, in your view, regarding security, Joanne?
Policy is the key one. I think there's we get fun questions like, how does SOUP ensure that the supply chain is 100% secure? And obviously we can't. So we have to be sure that we are providing the best information. And one of the things that we are trying to do is we work a lot more closely with that policy team, working with other groups, such as CISA and ODNI and GSA and NIST. That's a big change, I would say, over the past few years. These groups used to work much more independently and not together, and I think they are much more in step and understanding they have to work together, and that is helping us as both government customers and as SOUP as a government vehicle to provide customers with a sense that there is not just willy-nilly ideas going on about security, but rather there are plans there. And yes, we don't have 100% security, but we are doing the best we can, and we are doing it in a coordinated fashion.
Mm-hmm. As time goes on, what have you seen regarding the technical expertise that the agencies come to you with? The reason I ask that is you made that comment that people are coming to you less with, I don't know what I need, and more with a better idea, at least from a technical perspective of what they, at least a starting point of what they want.
I think as the way the government operates grows and the usage of, I would say, more contractor staff to support and let the government do kind of the more overviewing and versus the nitty-gritty piece, that might have an effect on it. We certainly have a lot of contractors that come to us for purchasing through our vehicle, authorized by the government, contract, and that has grown. And I think that might be a part of that is the government people may not have that exact information, but they can hire the contractor to do that security piece, and then they can rely on them to do it correctly. So hopefully that's true. Yeah. But I certainly see a definite growth in the usage of those companies in the IT world to get the equipment together, to get the products, to get the software, and then provide it to the government in a secure way.
You and I have spoken a number of times over the years in Q4, whatever the fiscal year happens to be in which we're having the conversation. I imagine you're already started the process to gear up for September 30th to get ready to help agencies close out the fiscal year.
Yes, it's been interesting that as we've grown in our usage, that I've actually had to worry less about that because we have become very efficient in how we operate, and are always available. And it almost seems like every day is September 30th almost at times because of the need to keep up with all the government requirements out there. But yes, we do obviously increase our hours. We make sure more staff is available as needed. We are continuously looking to improve ourselves anyway. So we will be ready as always to help get through that big August, September push to utilize the money as budgeted.
Joanne Wojtek of NASA SOUP. Some government and industry leaders are already looking beyond the new FEDRAMP roadmap and the goals it sets. Kevin Green is Chief Technology Officer for Public Sector at OpenText Cybersecurity. I asked him what he thinks the cloud security community needs next.
We have to have more visibility. I think visibility for me is the most important thing when they start talking about things like zero trust. You have to assume you're compromised, and elevating visibility becomes a key priority, I think, for organizations. I think it's part of a long list of things, but probably one of the most important things in disrupting threat actor capabilities, right? So if you can get early warning signals and signs of threat actor behavior and activities, I think you can be more responsive and do a lot of different things to disrupt their activities. So I do think learning from that is a way that I always try to help our customers put in place a more robust visibility or elevating visibility to be more responsive to cyber attacks. I also think one of my concerns is with everything becoming platform specific, I do see identity as the crux that is highly targeted by threat actors. I've been doing some research on my own. I noticed that software exploits circumvents access controls, identity type controls. We've seen that with the Avanta vulnerability 0-day. So as we see more and more software being pervasive as far as cloud technologies, whether it's software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software powers those things. So we have to be more resilient, build better software. But also I think the most important thing is elevating visibility so we can see threat actor behavior and activities early on in the attack lifecycle.
When you refer to visibility, visibility into what and who should be looking for whatever it is that you want them to gain visibility into?
I think we need to change the way we talk about visibility. When I say visibility, I'm talking about really hunting for threat actors, behaviors, signals, and obviously indicators of compromise is way too late, right? The data's already exfiltrated, so it's way too late. So trying to establish what I call early warning signals to look at those signals, those behaviors that are indicative to threat actor behaviors. So any way we can do that and start hunting. I always say you gotta hunt down versus hunt up. Hunting up is reactive, hunting down is more proactive. So a way to kind of formalize that is really try to formalize incident response more appropriately, understand what your threat profile is. So when you do get threat intelligence, you can codify that, it becomes actionable. You can build that situational awareness that's so important to gain an advantage around threat actor behavior and activities.
What's your sense of how the threat landscape is changing in order for someone to know what it is that they should be looking for when they're trying to gain that visibility?
I think it's changing at a very rapid pace. We've seen phishing for years. Phishing has been the attack vector for ransomware. We're starting to see more now compromising 0 days and compromising exploits and visibility, exploits in software as part of launching ransomware attacks. So I do think the work that CISA is doing with Secure by Design, Secure by Defaults is an important initiative that not only public sector, but private sector as well need to really take hold on and really formalize really good software security practices as part of their software, as part of their modernization efforts, because I think it's so important. If we can reduce the attack surface associated with poorly developed software, I always say software security is our first line of defense, right? It's not a firewall, it's not zero trust. And I'm working on a paper now where we're talking about there's a thin line between zero trust and 0-day, right? Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is because of the nature of how vulnerabilities are and threat actors are exploiting these software vulnerabilities, we know that a lot of these controls can be circumvented and bypassed with software exploits. So,
Kevin Green of OpenText Cybersecurity. Thanks for joining me for this Innovation in Government program presented by Carahsoft from GovForward's ATO and Cloud Security Summit. If you missed any part of this program, you can watch the show in its entirety on our website at fedgovtoday.com or the FedGov Today YouTube channel. Don't miss FedGov Today TV every Sunday morning at 10:30 on ABC 7 in the DC area or on the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Good night.